our nerves out a little bit, like,
For sure.
and do I have my intro sitting in front of me? No, I don't. Should I have it memorized by this point? Yeah, probably. What the fuck, Nancy? My
That's
brain
okay.
doesn't work. Literally, all I used to memorize scriptures like it
Oh.
was. Welcome to another conversation with the Apostate Sisters. I'm Patty, and I'm here with my sister Nancy, and we grew up in a doomsday cult called the Worldwide Church of God. We're also nerdy about history and culture, but critical of religion. So get ready to get mad or to nod your head in agreement as we finish off this history of Herbert W. Armstrong, his life and influences. Is it weird that I said finish off? I did it on purpose.
We are in our Unpack It series, so bringing us to climax is a thing.
Well, how have you been feeling about the Unpack It series now that we're 2 episodes out in the world?
Oh, I'm enjoying it. I'm really enjoying it. There's so many books that we can cover too, Pats.
We should maybe do some booklets and things too, like the shorter ones.
Yeah.
Might be nice to do some things about, the apocalypse or true womanhood. I'm kind of looking forward to true womanhood, actually.
I guess we kind of started this off because, well, I know I've never really felt close to our parents. And there was, like I said before, no one they emulated more than Herbert W. Armstrong. And I thought, well, what if we study this man? I feel like as we've gone through this timeline, we've discovered things like putting pieces into a puzzle from our childhood. Some things we remembered, some things we didn't. Some things all of a sudden they made sense. As soon as we went through this time, I'm like, oh, okay, this happened during this time period of our lives. Our entire childhoods and teenage years were dedicated to this. There was nothing else that we really knew. Like we got the backstory, who he was, and that was important to me to kind of figure out what type of person he was, how he duped people so badly the way he did, and how was he able to target vulnerable people like our parents and his organization. So, and how is his empire still living on? And it is. I realize that Armstrong has been dead since 1986. But again, there's all these splinter churches. And so his teachings are still being spread out into the masses. Both of our parents are in two of them. they're in separate churches at this point because he was excommunicated by one. But we can delve into how all these splinter churches came to be and so on. There's a little bit more that happens in the 90s and beyond. But we are going to start sort of at the late 80s where we left off last time and explain some of the changes that have been taking place and what's going on with what Herbert W. Armstrong taught. How is it into the public now?
Right. I think that has been maybe my biggest takeaway from everything you and I have been doing since we started this channel. And especially when it comes to what is going on with the Armstrongist ideas in the world now. Because
Mhm.
you're right, it's been so long since Armstrong passed. We've even gotten a lot of comments from, I assume, rather angry people about the age of our parents who are saying, why are you bringing this up? Why are you delving into this? He's been dead. Why are you, whatever? And the thing I just think about that is, hi, are you not paying attention to what we're saying? We're
Yeah.
here literally saying that these repercussions are still echoing out through all of the people who were in it, through the people who those people got married to, gave birth to, and
Mhm.
we are still affected by it, and we're encountering others who are maybe even more affected by it than we were. And if it had all been in the past and wasn't continuing, that'd be one thing. It'd be totally focused on healing, but instead, we're dealing with the recognition that there are still these groups out there and they're still fucking manipulating people and telling them to sell all their things and give all the money to the church.
Right.
That
And
destroys families.
yes.
And we don't have that much of a voice. We're just two girls who grew up in this country trying to find our way like everyone else.
But isn't it amazing how many people have already reached out to us and say, yeah, we were in the same scenario, but I have a different take. I have something that was far more horrific that happened to me and so on. They're coming out in droves to talk because they've never felt they had a voice before. I never felt I had a voice before. I was just remembering as I was going through this time, I'm like, um, in high school, I know I had at least one person say out loud, I've never heard you talk, Nancy. I've never heard you say a single word.
Oh
And I
my
went to high
God.
school with this person. So I never felt I had a voice. And I'm realizing all these little bits of religious trauma that are popping up, things that I didn't even realize until we started talking about this, and until we started dissecting and going, well, I have this going on in my life. How does it relate to the church? And it's amazing to me and quite horrifying to
Hmm.
realize that so many things had affected us in ways we didn't even realize. And it breaks my heart, all the other people out there, they were
They just
far more
think they're
indoctrinated.
broken. They
Yeah.
just go through life thinking like, well, okay, I guess this is just shit. And maybe I can blame it on the church, but I don't know if many people are even willing to go there because Armstrong's conditioning was so strong that as soon as you'd have a thought of like, oh, I think this is hurting me, vroom, nope, that's going to get shut down because your fear response comes up and needs to protect you because it got built into to us early on
Right.
that if we didn't follow the rules, didn't do what we were told, didn't, adhere to biblical teachings, whatever the fuck those are,
hmm
that we would, like die, get beaten, be left
Yeah.
alone, have nothing. It was
And
completely built into us that these would be the consequences of questioning. And so to be able to overcome that and question is going to take us working together. This is not a task for each person to deal with in their own hearts. I mean,
exactly.
yes, there are parts of this we each have to do for ourselves, but to hear each other's stories is
hmm
incredible.
I don't see anything good that comes out of this.
Out of like
Yeah.
Armstrongism. Okay.
I don't see the benefits of Armstrongism. I don't see where it has actually made anyone's lives better, other than to create this sort of art of manipulating yourself into believing certain things that aren't true. And then you go to your graves believing this stuff. And I'm like, you have missed out on your entire life. But
Oh
that's
my
their
gosh,
game.
exactly. Oh,
That is their game. They want those vulnerable people so that they will stick to the church. They will keep those tithes coming in.
do you
And
realize that is like
having,
just sucking the life energy out of people?
yeah,
Like literally, it's just sucking away the life they could have lived on planet Earth. You
yeah.
only get the one fucking life. I mean, yeah, okay, make up whatever the heck you want for after, but all we know is this one. We can't prove anything else. So why the hell would you give up everything you can actually see here to chase that?
I think a lot of people today, Pats, especially just mainstream Christians, will say, well, isn't it kind of dangerous to not believe in a God? Because they have that much fear instilled in them that if they don't at least try or, I don't know, pretend to believe in a God or try to understand the Bible, they're going to go to this terrible place, the burning lake of fire. That's scary, especially when you're told as a kid that this is going to happen. And it trickles into adulthood. And when we're not taught to ask questions and think critically, well, easier to maintain those sort of ideas. Yeah.
Well, it hurts all of us, right? People
Hurts
in the
all of
church
us.
and people not in the church. Because
hmm
then those people who were basically pulled out of society by Armstrongist and other Church of High Control ideas, all of a sudden the rest of us lose their talents, lose their contributions to an extent, right? We lose their brain, their like reasoning capability. It's not just lost to them, and that's as unfortunate as that is, it's lost to all of us. And we need all of us. I spend time in the activist sphere in climate and social justice type
Yep.
stuff. And this is a battle cry. I hate that all of my words are war words, but this is a battle cry that I bring to that part of my life too, that there's this idea of like, oh, activists are this thing, this separate thing, and that's what they do. Like, fuck no. I think everyone needs to be an activist. I think that's the only way we
Mhm.
make this human experience work for as many of us as possible. So we
Beautiful.
need those brains to be free.
I'm blown away by the fact that some people do not want this world to progress. They go back to the past and think they have all the answers that we have to abide by. Yes, we won't progress. We won't start thinking for ourselves. We won't use our talents because they don't want that. They don't want people to splinter away from their teachings. They don't want people to leave them. And yes, they have their own traumas.
At its heart, I think that people who are steeped in that conservatism, that like toxic conservatism, that's really what it is. They are responding to their own fear because it was drilled into them that like
Mhm.
this is the way it is, and oh, those newfangled new morality ways of doing things are going to end in your death. And so if we're taught that enough, well, guess what? We're not really going to embrace progress, are we?
We're putting out our contribution, whatever it may be. I think a person, something that is near and dear to their heart, whether they are a cancer survivor and they want to be an advocate to help people along who are struggling with cancer, whatever it may be, just doing something that helps humankind progress and makes the world better. Not, oh, the world is shit because of sin and that's the way it's going to be, and God's going to pull us out, his chosen ones, if you just believe. Fuck all the way off. How about we stop putting the shit there to begin with? Yes, terrible things happen, but how much of that does humankind do to itself?
I mean, we're here talking about our particular upbringing, and we're deciding that it's okay for us to deconstruct this publicly because what we're encountering is recognizing that bringing these things out into the light, bringing out these parts of us that we thought weren't acceptable, that stopped us from even recognizing who we were, those parts of us have been
Mhm.
hidden and stuck in the time and place that they were taught these things that hurt them,
Right.
right? So there's all these little boxes of us that haven't been heard, that haven't
Mhm.
been heard from for years. And they're in there hurting, still carrying the burdens that were put on us as children. And then I think to an extent, there's this protector part, especially for you, Nance. I feel like I've seen this protector part of
Mhm.
you that taught you or that like came to the forefront when you were feeling threatened. And that protector part said, don't cause a stir. Don't acknowledge what it is you actually want.
Right.
And it came to the front and showed you that you needed to be meek, you needed to obey, you needed to put your head down, and you needed to just do what you were told because that kept you safe. But that meant all those other parts of you that wanted to exist in the world didn't get to come out. You know, like those parts of you have a role to play in your life and did from the beginning, but yet they were burdened with this experience, with this idea, and shoved to the back.
Mhm.
And so now, as we publicly deconstruct, I'm hoping that we make it safer for other people to take those little parts of themselves out to like talk to that protector and say,
Yeah.
hey, look, you've come so far since then. Let
Yeah.
me show you what you're capable of. Let me show you that that thing you were taught, that thing that happened to you, doesn't have to keep you trapped anymore. And it's like
Mhm.
we get more parts of ourselves back to use
Mhm.
to make a difference in this world. You know, we're talking a little bit about each person being able to come out and fully be available to do what they need to do in the world. I think we've been so conditioned by the great white man history that we ascribe these big things to a single person. And I just don't think that's true. I think the only way change happens is by small acts by all the individuals.
Honestly, Pats, I feel like I'm living my best life.
Despite the little boxes that parts of you were put in when you identified those parts as unacceptable to other people in the world,
Hmm.
those parts need a place to come out into. And the fact that you can go within and talk to those inner parts of yourself that are still stuck in their old traumas, the fact that you have this amazing life now that you can show them and be like, hey, I know you've been stuck in there, and I know you had a lot of creativity, a lot of joy that didn't make it out into the world, but
Yeah.
I want to unburden you. I want to unburden you of
Unburden.
the, yeah, unburden. Like,
Yeah.
take off that idea that got stuck on you, on that little part of you way back when, and say you don't have to live under that shadow anymore because look, it worked out.
Yeah.
This is you now.
Yeah.
And so then that part can come back and be creative again, the way it
Yeah.
always wanted to be. And certainly some of that's been happening for you as you wrote a book. You know, you found such freedom in being able to write Velikari, which is definitely fiction, but it's based on you and things that you went through. You know, it doesn't address the religious part as much, but certainly the aftermath of how you
Yeah.
engaged with the world because of your upbringing. And we've recently connected with Kara Reynolds, who is
Yeah.
as an author, and she's written this amazing book that you've loved. I still need to read, called
It's
Priestess.
that was the way that Kara tapped into her pain and turned it into this beautiful artsy story. Her book's amazing, and I'm excited to interview her pretty soon. If there's a creative side to themselves, they can do things like maybe write a book, start a YouTube or podcast channel, um, connect with other people in the community. You know, you don't have to go to a church to connect with people. You can find them everywhere. They're out there living their lives out in the world. Church feels so structured to me. And I feel like as humans, we're just
Contrived, maybe.
contrived is the word. Yes. I just don't think we're made to be that. Anyway, no, this is a good talk. I think both you and I, Patty, are living our best lives now because we were denied it so much.
It does
Yes.
make me wonder if coming out of these ideas is maybe a little bit harder for people who didn't grow up in it in a
Hmm.
way, you know. Oh, there's different aspects, I guess, right? Because if they didn't grow up in it and they chose it for themselves as an adult, I mean,
Right.
that means that their upbringing, whatever it was, put them in a place where that made a lot of good sense. And
Yeah.
that might be even harder to see and admit and get past if you chose it for yourself as an adult. Where, you know, for us, I think we do have some sort of, I don't know, an out where I don't have to say, oh, I was silly and thought this was a good idea,
Hmm.
right? Or I
Yep.
was deceived because I was a child. I
Right.
didn't, I could have been told anything and I wouldn't have known the
Right.
difference.
Hmm.
Right. So in some ways, you know, that I assume that makes it a bit easier for me to be able to admit to what these
Yeah.
things were and what I thought because it wasn't my fault. Now, I will say it's not anyone's fault, even if they came to it as an adult.
People sometimes come to me be like, well, if you weren't raised in this, doomsday cult, this horrible religious organization, would you still believe in God? And I know you've said before, well, I don't think we can know. I think I do know. And I think my brain has never been wired to believe in something like that. It's too reality focused, it's too logical. Um, so we were raised in a doomsday cult with this really scary God that we were supposed to fear and yet also love. Couldn't convince myself that he was real, despite my efforts. Oh, well, maybe it is the step for me to go into evangelicalism, like one of these mega fucking churches, even selling Amway, the whole works. And I thought, well, maybe this is the path. But despite this God just having a prettier display, so to speak, being more of like the forgiving type of God, I still couldn't convince myself he was real. And so I think my brain in general just was never set up to believe in gods, goddesses, deities, supernatural. That's not to say it couldn't change at some point, but I don't know what people want me to do. But I mean,
Yeah.
I've read the Bible from cover to cover. It was boring enough the first time. I'm not going to sit around studying it. Actually, it's kind of funny. My husband, he comes to me recently and he heard people talking about Bible study. Uh, we were we were out traveling somewhere and we were approached by four, maybe five different people from the same church organization saying, "Hey, would you guys like to join us for a Bible study?" No formalities, nothing. They just talked about going to a Bible study. Suman was just making the jokes later. He's like, "Why the fuck would they study that book? Is there a test later?" Like he didn't it didn't grasp it, like he didn't understand, like why are people literally taking their time out of their life to go and talk to people about the Bible. And I still don't have an answer other than this is what they are convinced is true, and it helps them if there are more people who also believe it, right? Then it's like their sense of community is growing and their salvation lies on the horizon here. They don't want anyone to question that. It's an us versus them mentality. It goes back to
Mhm.
that.
I would also say that belief is a habit of thought.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so I have noticed this as I have actually tried to move into and out of various belief systems. It works. If I
And
engage with a particular idea consistently,
yeah,
I will realize, like, oh, I can actually tell my brain is geared toward that. And I'm seeing other things in that context. Like, I
right.
can observe this happening. And then if I stop consuming that type of content, my brain shifts elsewhere. It's obvious. You talk about repetition being an important part of all of this. Well, yeah, go to church every week, maybe twice a week. Oh, buy our CDs, right? Like Amway stuff, right? So
Mhm.
you're always listening to that and you're
Yeah.
literally self-indoctrinating
Yeah.
and buying those things, giving money to the company selling them along the way. So it's all a pretty toxic pile of nonsense.
Well, and faith is the art of lying to yourself.
Ooh, I don't think I've heard
Yeah.
it said exactly that way.
Trying to convince yourself of something that isn't true. And people will tell us, oh, well, you don't believe in God just because you don't want to believe. Well, first of all, you can't decide whether you do believe in something or not. You're either convinced of something or you're not. Maybe part of that may be true. I don't want to believe that the God who created this earth with all its terrible yet incredible things, beautiful things in this world as well, could have done the sort of things that he did in the Bible. You know, send a bear to rip children to shreds, tell his people to dash babies against rocks, genocide, the misogyny, all the things that are listed in the Bible. I don't want to believe that our creator, um, I think I have an incredible heart and I care about people so much that sometimes it hurts. And I don't
Yes.
want to think that the God that created me is like that. Like that doesn't make any sense to me.
If Yahweh showed up and was like, "Yeah, yo, it's true. It was me. I did all those things." I'd be like, "Okay, cool, you exist. I am definitely not worshiping you." Like, would I if I knew that I still had to worship him and if I didn't, I'd have eternal torment? Maybe. Maybe I would. I'd if like he doesn't mind me just faking it.
My morals and values do not align with the Christian gods. They don't.
No. They're better.
I think the reason we kind of got on this tangent here is because we are going to be talking about the changes that occurred in the Worldwide Church of God as the new leader, Joseph W. DeCoch, changed the doctrine. It's going to be an absolute shit show. And this is the ending result that we have today.
Well, think of all of that conditioning that got put into people that was pure Herbert W. Armstrong. It makes me wonder if Takac realized what a cult of personality the whole thing was. Like, clearly the ideas have stuck because it's spread around in all the splinter churches now.
And then when somebody comes along and tells you all the things that you have held near and dear to your heart have gone away, and it didn't really matter that you sacrificed, they know they gave up a substantial portion of their life to this, to like, but why I did all this for nothing? Oh my
Right.
God, the daggers
Oh,
are
that's
coming
such
out.
a good point. Right. I didn't even think about that, Nancy. The anger that people may have had, I gave up. I cut ties with my family because I wouldn't do Christmas. All of
They
the
got
things.
divorced. There were suicides, all
Yes.
kinds of shit. And now all of a sudden they're saying, oh, it's just you're saved through grace and that's it. You didn't actually have to do this. You can imagine there was hellfire raining down during that time period. We're gonna talk about it.
Well, we just did an entire episode on like working through our trauma.
I can now confidently call myself an atheist and not feel ashamed of it. To be like, it wasn't of my choosing. I do not believe because I do not believe. And I can't convince myself to believe why. I'm not going to keep trying. I'm going to accept who I am.
That's
Yay.
huge.
That's me.
Yeah.
Yes. Let's start this timeline before I get sidetracked again. I'm so sorry. Okay.
Honestly, moving forward, I'll just say anytime, no matter what the topic is, if we go off on a track about healing shit and deconstructing something, we just have to stop for it.
Right.
We just have to, because that's what this whole thing is about.
In the last episode, Patty, we left off on the 80s. However, I am going to start back up in the late 1980s as the doctrinal changes started to take place because this is huge for what would become today. Now, remember, Joseph W. Tkach Sr. is the one that was selected by Herbert W. Armstrong to be his successor. His son would go on to take over the organization later. But Joseph Tkach Sr. is the one that made all the doctrinal changes that were extremely controversial. It changed everything about the Worldwide Church of God. Everything they stood for got changed. And it was a slow process, but I'm just going to go through some of the changes that would ultimately take place. It was a situation where, like, the leaders of the Worldwide Church of God started just kind of coming together and talking to each other and be like, some things are not right here. And I think they started coming to those revelations after Armstrong died because they were just so immersed in doing what he instructed them to do. They believed he was the last great day prophet of God. And once he died, all of a sudden, they started to get little bits of their own brains back and started to think for themselves. I'm like, oh, this is actually bullshit. Is anyone else thinking this? And then they find each other and then they literally put this doctrinal committee together where they go through verse by verse, page by page, trying to dissect what the church taught and was it correct. Some of those things were Sabbath eventually was no longer adhered to. Okay. It's always been that church was sundown to sundown, Friday night to Saturday night. And then all of a sudden people could start going to church on Sundays like mainstream Christianity. Pork and shellfish were not allowed to be eaten, and then it was done away with. Holy days done away with, and all of a sudden you could celebrate things like Easter and Christmas. That was huge. The Trinity, I believe, was now believed to be true as well. Is that correct? I know there's different forms of the Trinity, but I think Worldwide Church of God has always been non-Trinitarian. And I think that was changed also.
Agreed. I do
Uh,
believe that's true.
okay. Medical care was now allowed. Makeup was for sure allowed to be worn by women at this point.
Yeah.
That went back and forth, especially when Armstrong's wife Loma had died. I think the church started allowing makeup to be worn, but there were a couple times where it was not allowed. British Israelism, I believe, was no longer taught as law. You know, that whole concept that we had talked about already.
Really? Oh, I
I
mean, because it was
think.
racist as shit.
But then that also ties into they no longer talked about things like prophecies, end times, doomsday, wars. You know, it was like with Armstrong, he was constantly opening up his newspaper and talking about the war and devastation that was going on in the world and how Bible prophecy tied into that. I think that more or less went away as well. Well, and then divorce and remarriage was also changed. That was a couple times, and I think that was actually in the 70s when that changed, but that for sure went away by this point. It's no longer Worldwide Church of God as it is. It is now like mainstream Orthodox evangelical church. Like you're just an average Christian now, people. You're no longer taught you're like elect because it was more inclusive, which I think for some people it was better, but for a lot of those people it was worse. And a lot of people left the church.
All these
Mm-hmm.
people who were in there, they wanted what was there. They were
Yeah.
convinced that those things that set their church apart were important. And you're
Mhm.
right. It was like the changes just
Bombshell.
pulled the rug out from under all of that.
And there were people that weren't having it. There were people that left immediately. I'm like, this is not the church we're going to go to. Again, our parents included. I remember the day that our dad decided, oh, we are not going to church anymore. And he announced it in the living room of our home in Wisconsin. I remember that. And that was the happiest like day of my life. I don't know if you were off to college at this point.
By my senior year, I was not going to Worldwide anymore. I had
Mm.
gotten sucked into an evangelical church because of a boy.
Hmm.
Surprise. And so were our parents still going to that church and I wasn't? Because I was like, fuck you, I'm 18.
I didn't realize that by not going to Worldwide Church of God anymore meant such further tragedy was going to occur.
That wasn't until like 97 when our family decided to not be a part of it anymore. We hung around for some of those changes, but some of
Right.
those changes didn't happen till 97.
Yeah. Well, I think because dad had nowhere to go either. A lot of the people at church that wanted to stick to these ideals, they thought, oh, maybe they'll fill it out for a little bit. But where do you go at that point? There was just chaos. People creating all these splinter churches because they wanted to continue Armstrongism and the Worldwide Church of God just losing money at an unprecedented rate. That was the late 80s when it started. This had not come out yet. It's not until later in the 90s when they start telling the church of the changes. Here's a fun little nugget I wanted to throw in here. 1988. Have you heard of the book Churchill's Gold?
No.
Yeah, that is a book written by Garner Ted Armstrong, and it's a novel.
Wait. Did he actually write it or did he do like a Trump move and like have a ghostwriter write it?
I don't know. I don't know if there's any way to know. He did write it under a pseudonym. So the author's name is actually William Talboy Wright. That is Garner Ted Armstrong. So he wrote it kind of anonymously, but it's a novel. So it's like this World War II story set in 1941 in the months leading up to Pearl Harbor. You know, Garner Ted Armstrong, he was in the Army back in 1948. I don't know
Hmm.
how long he was in the Army for, but I feel like this book is probably like his alter ego, like maybe the life that Garner Ted wanted to lead instead of the one that he did. Because he never wanted to be in this from the start, but he got sucked into it, and he's like, "Well, I want to be an actor. I want to be, a club singer, and all this." He was very charming, very good looking, and he just had a presence about him. And I think he would have been probably a very famous actor had he been able to pursue the things that he wanted out of life.
He did have his pilot's license, right? Like we
He
do
did.
actually know that about him. So I mean, to an extent, he tried to have some of those things in his life, it seems.
By the
Mhm.
way, his pen name, uh, he got that from William Dillon, his maternal grandmother, Isabel Talboy, his maternal grandmother, and Eva Wright, his paternal grandmother. So that's where he got his pen name from. William Talboy Wright. I thought that was interesting. So I don't know why he felt he had to write the book under a pseudonym, but he did. Maybe he just felt it was easier that way to have this world separate from the one that he lived in, the Worldwide Church of God.
I wonder
That'd
how
be
well
interesting.
known it was that he wrote the book, like among church circles and things back then.
I don't know. I didn't even find out about it until this last bit of research I had done. I was like, oh, Garner Ted wrote a novel? Sweet. I do plan on reading it at some point. All right, Patty, 1989. Dun dun dun. We have our first splinter church. And when I say splinter church, I'm referring to those churches that split off from Worldwide Church of God after changes started taking place. Now, there were a few back in the 70s and beyond, like Garner Ted had started his own church, the Church of God International, which he goes on to get a different one as well as soon as more scandal pops up. But this is what I'm referring to with splinter churches after worldwide split, change the doctrine. Okay. Yeah.
I just want to point out, like, I was just thinking about the word splinter in general, and it's like a little sharp piece of something that gets shoved under your flesh and you didn't want it there, and then it sits there and gets festery.
Ooh, Patty, that's fucking deep. Damn.
Actually, splinters are usually kind of shallow, but it's okay. That was a bad joke. I'm sorry. Forgive
No,
me.
it's a good joke. Gerald Flurry is pretty shallow. So, Philadelphia Church of God, this church still exists. It was founded in 1989 by Gerald Flurry. He was excommunicated that same year for disagreeing with Takach and all the other leaders of Worldwide Church of God.
It was like, oh, you
Yes.
don't like what I say? Bye. Down to
Yeah.
the piranhas.
Takach was very adamant to like, no, we are a New Testament church now. Mhm.
How I'm just so curious how it was that Armstrong was like, yeah, you're the guy. Like, did he know? Did Takach keep it a secret that he had this like alternate evangelical life that he wanted to bring about? It's so strange to me.
He's also the editor-in-chief of the Philadelphia Trumpet magazine. Okay, that's kind of like the plain truth. He also creates the Armstrong International Cultural Foundation. Who does that sound like? And founder and chancellor of the Herbert W. Armstrong College in Edmond, Oklahoma, where it's where the congregation is also located. So it's just like regurgitating Armstrongism again in different splinters. And you know, all these churches are not agreeing with each other either. They all
Right.
say they're the one true church. Gerald Flurry is no exception. In usual fashion, yeah, Gerald Flurry, he goes on to write a church booklet the following year called Malachi's Message. And he distributed that to Worldwide Church of God members. Basically, you know, he's trying to get people away from Worldwide Church and come follow his organization. He told people that it was delivered to him by a mighty angel, and that it was the little book that was actually prophesied about in Revelations 10 of the Bible. Yes.
What the actual fuck? Yeah, God talked to you? God like talked to you.
No,
Really?
it was an angel, Patty. It was an angel that talked to him. One of God's angels. I shit you not. I couldn't make this up if I tried.
Public service announcement. If
Hmm.
you think that God's angels are talking to you, I would highly recommend that you seek the help of a psychologist and not start a church. Thank you. That's all.
He also said that the biblical prophet Malachi prophesied over 2,000 years ago that the leaders of the worldwide church of God would do this, that they would change the doctrine. And anyone who didn't follow him specifically were destined for the great tribulation, and warned them of a nuclear holocaust that awaited them. He
Holy
called,
shit. They got
and
so much mileage out of the Cold War for their church.
so Gerald Flurry also called his followers the Philadelphians, who were very elect and could not be deceived, promising them a headquarters position in the rulership in God's kingdom. He said that his book, Malachi's Message, was their ticket to a place of safety during the worst time of suffering. So this is his way of also getting his book out there.
Wait, what the actual fuck? He was promising people things in the headquarters area.
His book was the ticket. Yes. So he is also trying to sell his book. I don't even think it was an actual book. I think it was one of the, church booklets. It wasn't like an
So
actual public book.
did he actually sell his books unlike Armstrong? Because Armstrong gave his away for free in hopes
I
of
don't know.
getting, the cool 30% of people's gross income.
Also, Gerald Flurry has declared himself to be the unnamed prophet in John 121 of the Bible.
Oh my gosh, it's so
Oh.
stupid. It's so
And
stupid.
yeah,
I'm
so he
sorry. But you've got Pac saying he's Elijah or whatever. Like, what are you doing, dude?
Yeah.
Whatever Elijah did, or Joshua the high priest, whatever you want to say, did last was his charge. Whatever he did last. I wondered, is it the 512 sermons? Or is it something else? Whatever he did last, and I had to accept, okay, I guess somehow, if I don't see where prophesying occurs, then I guess if the last thing I do is finish this series and the first kingdom arrives IR1, I guess somehow that was prophesying, but I knew it wasn't, yet I thought whatever I did last had to be prophesying the first time. Do you see the dilemma?
The things that people get away with in religion that would have them put in a mental institution in any other context. I mean,
Right.
what?
He took the biblical prophecy here and he designated himself as King Jeroboam. I I'm not making that up, Patty. That ancient king of Israel. He called himself.
He thinks he's King Jeroboam. He
Yep.
thinks he's something else, you said. Pac thinks he's Elijah. Like, so what I'm understanding is this sounds to me like Armstrongism ideas believe in reincarnation.
For something a little more modern here, he also apparently said that when Joe Biden won the presidential election in 2020, it was Trump's greatest sin that he rejected his throne.
What?
What did he want Trump to do about that? He also claimed that Queen Elizabeth II was the remaining monarch on King David's throne, but then he changed that, of course. In 2018, he told his ministry to be prepared to go to the Cave of Adullam. I don't know where exactly this is supposed to be, but Cave of Adullam is the place of safety for
Is that
God's
in
true
Petra?
people. Huh?
Is that in Petra?
I was going to say maybe that's the same as Petra Jordan, which Armstrong always taught. I don't know. But anyway, his church, okay, so the Philadelphia Church of God has been labeled as a doomsday cult. Surprise, surprise. It's been criticized by the media and other religious groups, and Gerald Flurry himself has been called a typical arrogant cult leader who has secluded his followers and is totalitarian, dictatorial, and tyrannical. Ex-members of the Philadelphia Church of God state that he uses his power and influence to command absolute obedience. Yeah, okay, that's what they do, of its church members and threatens their salvation for disobedience. Some members have fallen into poverty due to the financial demands in place. Children
Well,
have
no
died.
shit. Of course, it puts people into financial struggles and their
Mhm.
descendants, for fuck's sake.
And children have apparently died due to inadequate medical treatment. He's been compared to apocalyptic leader David Koresh of Branch Davidians. Yes.
I just hope none of this ends in a fireball.
Oh, and by the way, I have actually been to Waco to see that the compound where the Branch Davidians were at. Same sort of vibe. So they rebuilt the church after it had burned down during that whole, Waco situation. They're still teaching the same sorts of things. Even
What?
David Koresh, yeah, David Koresh still has followers just like Armstrong does today. I listen to this preacher talk. I mean, it's people that are visiting because they want to see the history behind what had happened here with the Waco, massacre, whatever you want to call it. And all around the walls are like these pictures of Trump and doomsday. I was pretty blown away. You don't even really know the compound's there unless you're looking for it. It's not like they advertise this as sort of a tourist site, but of course, I was passing through Waco. I had to go see this place.
I just can't believe it's still a church. Like it's
It
still a
is
thing.
still a church. They still believe in David Koresh. That's what I'm saying. I don't think Armstrong's reputation is going anywhere. He's going to have fault
Fuck.
for who knows how long.
This
Same vibe.
horrifies me. Okay,
Same.
and here's the thing. Like everyone's really into hearing about the David Koresh stories, the Jonestown drink the Kool-Aid stories, the
Right.
Hale Bopp Comet, everybody dies stories, right? Like those are so big, so salacious that we get sucked into it and we go, it's horrible. And even people who are in things like the Philadelphia church would probably go, those are horrible. But I don't think there's that much difference between blind followers that die in a fireball, die by poison, than people who sign on for life to things like Worldwide, Philadelphia, Restored Church of God. Those people are just as much being killed by the ideology as the ones who drink poison, the ones who drank the Kool-Aid. Because our family and all the people like them, they're drinking the Kool-Aid. It's just killing who they are instead of killing their physical body. It is not as different as we would like to think. And I want all the people out there still stuck in Armstrongist churches to recognize that they are having their life stolen and it need not continue. And they need not do it to their children.
These ideologies took our parents away. Like it split our family apart. We have no idea who they actually are. And so we were robbed of, I guess, a proper childhood, so to speak.
And they don't give a shit who we are.
No.
Their goal was never for us to be who we were.
No.
You know, whether they believe that or not, I don't know. But the way it came across to us was we did not matter for who we were. We mattered for their proof of doing what they were supposed to do in God's eyes.
I remember seeing a booklet as a kid, how to train your children God's way or something like that. And I remember cringing at that. Like, oh, just train your children like little dogs to do what you say.
Because how we parent children makes all the goddamn difference. That was all important, though. I stand by it.
It is important. And we've scratched the surface. That was one splinter church. I could go on and on about the splinter churches, and I think we're going to have to talk about them more in depth, solely individually, because that's just what we got to do. We can start with David C. Pack, all right?
We're going to unpack it.
On to the next one. Splinter church. We have the Global Church of God, okay? This one was founded by, of course, former Worldwide Church of God evangelists and ministers. And I want to say Roderick Meredith was kind of the main guy that started this. He was an evangelist for a good 40 years under Armstrong. He was excommunicated in 92 for disagreeing with doctrinal changes, of course. So 92, the very same year he starts this church, Global Church.
Surprise.
Surprise. It was established in Glendora, California. Now I think it's based mainly in England because there's not really much of a presence in North America anymore. I think. Also, a magazine and television program knockoff came out. The name? Not The World Tomorrow, but The World Ahead. Yeah. I know.
I'm sorry, as I know I'm going to steal some of the future thing you're going to say, but I know Restored Church of God is the world to come.
Yeah, I know.
Oh my
Isn't it
God.
fucking stupid?
It's like they're fifth graders and they're learning how to write papers and they're just like taking words and using synonyms.
They have no creativity, Patty. They have no they can't come up with anything on their own. That's why they keep regurgitating this shit. Okay.
And that is a product of the church. You don't want to think of anything on your own. You have to look to this book. You have to look to my booklets.
Yeah. You can't steer too far off course because you have to stick to what is being taught. So David C. Pack of Restored Church of God, that'll come later. But he also joins this splinter church, the Global Church. All right.
Oh.
And he would go on to be excommunicated from it and form yet another church.
Is that because he was like, I'm Elijah, everyone. I'm Elijah.
That fucking tool. Okay, so he was excommunicated from Worldwide Church of God. Then he was excommunicated from Global Church of God. And then now he created the Restored Church of God.
He was maybe not very accepting of authority over him. So he just had to go and be authority because obviously he's the walking zombie reincarnated several people in the Bible somehow. Yeah. Yikes.
And guess what? Not only is the Global Church of God a splinter of Worldwide, but that also splits apart into different splinter churches. So it's almost like a family tree that we can go back to. All right. I'm surprised I didn't write one actually to see where all the churches go from
It's like
here.
evolution and speciation.
Yes. All right. So by 98, this was only around for 6 years. What became known as an open letter from the Council of Elders, there was some more shenanigans going on. So Roderick C. Meredith, a name that we'll come to be very familiar with, he got into a dispute with the board members over governance issues, and he was excommunicated. Yes, that's just what you do. You start questioning stuff or trying to take charge, which I think Roderick C. Meredith was trying to take charge instead of it being more of a, group effort.
Oh my God, the toxic pit of vipers.
Literally that same year, Pats, he goes on to form his other splinter church, which is Living Church of God, which still exists today. And a good 80% of members from Global Church of God moved over there. And yeah, Global Church of God was mostly disbanded.
80%? I mean, I'm laughing and I shouldn't be laughing. Like, I know the human cost to all of that, right? We know that families got wrecked, that humans had medical issues they shouldn't have had. Oh my gosh. I know it's not funny, but like it's ridiculous.
Because to us, it's so obvious, Pats. That's why we're laughing. But at
Well,
the
if you
same
live
time,
in reality, it's obvious that it's nonsense.
but that's the problem. They preyed upon people that did not really see reality. They couldn't. It was a scary place for them. Place they didn't want to be. And they offered them this solution. So,
Well, the
okay.
1950s, where all of this got its, momentum, wasn't exactly a place where reality existed anyway, because it was all Cold War and American exceptionalism. I don't know.
Right.
There was all a smokescreen of bullshit.
The same year, 1992, Church of the Great God is founded. You know who is a member of this? Our Father.
Yeah.
Yep. This is the one he's in. We have another Splinter Church. This was founded by several former Worldwide Church of God elders, initially as some sort of like religious nonprofit, I guess. Now it's a small congregation of about 400 members in 50 different congregations worldwide. Obviously, our father is a member of it because he was in Restored Church of God under David C. Pack, and he got excommunicated or disfellowship, whatever they call it, for asking questions. And then he immediately went over to Church of the Great God. Notice how all the splinter churches have some sort of like Church of God in it because the name was so significant to Armstrong. You remember us talking about that?
Right.
So they put that in. Suman and I did meet a lot of these people. Okay. I was talking to Dad years ago about wanting to come and visit. I thought, maybe they'd want to get to know their son-in-law a little bit. And we were traveling around all over the place at the time. So he invited us to the Feast of Tabernacles in Myrtle Beach, where he, constantly has it with Church of the Great God. And so he invited us. I'm not going to sit here saying terrible things about these people. I think that Dad is content. I'm not going to say he's happy. He's content with where he's at. I think there's no way he's going to actually get out of these churches at this point. He's been so ingrained in it that this is his life now. The teachings that they have are absolutely disgusting. I did sit through one of the churches and I made Suman sit through it as well because I wanted him to get some little taste of what it was like as a child going through this. And I said, watch your eye rolling. Don't say anything. Don't fidget. Just sit there and fucking listen and imagine me as a little child sitting there going through this. Okay. And afterwards he's like, what the fuck was that? They talking about, unblemished goats and shit. What was that? Like, he even laughed about like the two ministers or whatever that were talking. We're talking about the exact same subject, including the same sort of like passages from the Bible. And he's like, they didn't connect with each other prior to it. No, they just brushed it off. Like, obviously God wanted you to hear this message because we both talked about the same thing. So, and we went through, meeting a few people. A lot of them were very nice,
Sure,
in
of
my
course.
opinion. And I remember, my husband just thinking, well, what are some of those people doing there? I don't think they actually want to be there. One of them was discussing how he thought the world was going to end in the next year. He's like, I know it's going to happen. It's going to be in the next year. They had face painting at one of the little games they had playing. And I remember one of the mothers telling her child he couldn't get a dragon painted on his face because, satanic imagery or something like that, which pissed me off. It was one of those things. I remember one child there too that he just had this look on his face like I probably would have had when I was a child. And I really just wanted to go up to him and be like, you don't, it's okay to not believe in this. You can get out of this someday. I wanted to tell him that because I saw that look on his face. I was like, I was in your place. I want to save you. He didn't want to be there. He has dreams and aspirations and he's stuck in it too. And I'm like, this cycle has to end, Patty. It has to stop.
But that feeling you had of wanting to tell that little guy that it's
Mhm.
going to be okay and he can get out someday.
Yeah,
That's what we got to do for our little selves.
I know. And I never had an opportunity to get him away from everyone and actually talk to him. I would have loved to. Just if I could have saved one, if I could have saved one child and let them know, hey, we're here for you. All right. We got out. Yeah, that was really something. Just the feelings I had sitting in church, it was the same yet different. I was like, I'm an adult now and I actually do have the capacity to understand what is going on now, not like when I was a child and I just had to eat this shit up.
Right. When you were just kind of encapsulated by the fear box you were put in.
All right, so moving on, 1992, we're still in that same year. Armstrong's already dead by this point, but he does lose a child, his firstborn child, Beverly. She dies this year. She was 73. I don't think either of his daughters got involved in the church at all. I could be wrong, but I don't think they were really, really into it. And
Maybe
they were
just as
women
a,
anyway.
yeah, I was gonna
So,
say maybe just as a paramour for their own dad. Ugh.
and then the following year, by 1993, I think you and I moved away, right, Pats? We moved. Our dad got laid off. He was working for Measure X there in Silicon Valley, and I think that paper company went through something, and he got laid off.
Well, when you're working on computer systems that make paper, you've got a bit of a conflict of interest eventually there.
And that whole area is now Apple.
Hmm.
Yeah, you and I took that trip back there to see Apple, but it was like, I remember being in that area, Dad taking us, or he took me as a child to Measure X where he used to work.
I actually think kind of a cool thing that
Mhm.
that we got out of that experience is not only did we get to experience the San Jose, the California flavor,
Yeah.
and visits to Pasadena of the Worldwide Church of God. Then when we moved, it was still Worldwide Church of God in 93 when we moved to Wisconsin. And what we experienced there was kind of an entirely different way of engaging with Worldwide Church of God ideas. Because any church type thing is going to exist in the context of its people, of its society. And so the society in San Jose was quite different than the society going on there in rural Wisconsin. And so we
Right.
got to see a little bit of both about how the church operated and how it affected people's lives. And I
Yeah.
will definitely say that I think I saw a lot more poverty among the people in the Wisconsin group than in the
Mhm.
California group, just the way I saw it at the time.
Mhm.
Um, but so yeah, it's interesting to recognize that how differently that played out in city versus rural applications.
Yeah, so we were at 1993. Our parents moved away to rural Wisconsin, and we started going to Feast of Tabernacles. Where did we go to Feast of Tabernacles when we were kids in California? Where did we go?
So we did do some traveling, like across the country traveling when there was fewer of us children. But for most of my childhood that I actually remember, the early years we were going to Sacramento, California, And then as time went on, we spent most of our years in Redding, California. They're in the northern part of the state. Yep.
So we were going to Feast of Tabernacles in Redding, California. Then our family moved to rural Wisconsin. And the reason for that is our father is from Wabeno, Wisconsin, and our mother is from Los Angeles. And he moved out there to California for a job. They got married, they got involved with the church, and then he got laid off with Measure X, and then they moved back to Wisconsin, which the majority of our relatives on our father's side live in Wisconsin. That would make sense that we ended up going there. But then we started attending Feast of Tabernacles in Wisconsin Dells. That was a big site for the feast. Quite a lot of changes for us. I mean, things were pretty diverse and liberal in California, and then we go to very rural, white Wisconsin. And so, yeah, things changed. And it was like the biggest snowstorm. We had never really seen snow at that point. And then here we moved to Wisconsin, and it's this huge snowstorm that occurs. Okay.
So I will note that when we started going to the Wisconsin Dells feast site, I remember there being a lot of people eventually talking about how strange it was to be there when we were there, because the building's huge. The building, when like all the chairs are set up, it would hold, I think, like 10,000 people or something like that, 10, 11,000. And so I remember everyone kind of whispering, because when they walked in one of the years that we went, only about half the building was full of chairs. It was like the amount of chairs needed, and therefore there was far fewer people attending the feast there. So I'm going to guess that that was post 1994 and like the big changes. And so when we saw, you know, people dropping off out of the church, it was obvious when you got them all together at a big festival site that was once full of chairs.
So what was going on was you have a bunch of newsletters and journals coming out that are sort of helping the people that are getting out of Worldwide Church of God. Like, you know, they're changing the doctrines here. I don't want to keep going. Where do I go? Because the splinter churches were just starting to form by this point. And there's also Exit and Support Network was founded in 1993, which is a website where people could go if they're getting away from Worldwide Church of God and not getting into like one of these splinter churches. Be like, I want to talk about like the religious and spiritual abuse that happened to me. This is a great website, and it's actually still around. The founder, you know, I think it was a survivor of Worldwide as well. Her background is business management, mental health, nursing, and she's a crisis intervention counselor. And so she's a good one to talk to about survivors. I think it's also like people that are still Christian, if I'm not mistaken, which I think I can understand why. You and I got into evangelicalism as well once we left the church. So it wouldn't surprise me that a lot of people getting out of Worldwide had become more mainstream Christian because it was just an easy step in that direction. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. And I mean, mainstream Christianity is very cultural for us.
Right.
And so if you're leaving this church, I can see why people wouldn't think, oh, I'm just not a believer of any kind then. You just start molding yourself to the society that the church was within.
Just piddly little tidbits at this point, but Ambassador College in Big Sandy, Texas, it was renamed to Ambassador University because at that point it became accredited from the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. And so it went from like a 2-year college to 4. Yeah.
I remember that. I remember that accreditation was a big damn deal. Well, just in time to shut it down, I guess.
Just in time to shut it down, because here's what happens. The end of 1994, Christmas Eve sermon by Joseph W. Tkach Sr. This is the bombshell announcement of the official changes to the doctrine. He had already had a speech over in Atlanta, Georgia by this point, so people knew what was going on. And then this is when he announced these official changes. We got to imagine what people were thinking at this point, something that they have dedicated their life to. I know we talked about it a little bit already, but it In the documentary that had come out not much later called Called to Be Free, they started talking about what it was like for people walking around like Ambassador College campus, what people were thinking. What does this mean? They thought, well, God was making official changes. So if I don't go along with these changes, am I not following God? But then you have these people that completely rejected it and started all the splinter churches. And people like our father, he went straight to what he does, looking for just the most fundamentalist person he could find. And that was Brother Stair of Overcomer Ministries in South Carolina. And that is how our family ended up splitting apart. They moved away to South Carolina, leaving you and I behind. I was 17, just trying to find my way. You were in college. And eventually he got to the point where like, Brother Stair was a false prophet. We'll get into him a little bit more, but yeah.
I know, I'm sorry. We got so off track.
No, we have a lot of stuff to talk about with this because this is when you and I were getting older and starting to see actually what was going on.
We weren't just obedient children anymore. We were coming into ourselves as humans
Right.
and trying to evaluate how we were going to do the rest of our life. We didn't think we were going to get to have a life. We thought it would end. We thought we wouldn't be grown-ups. And then all of a sudden, here we are, and oh shit. Well, okay, what do we do now? What's real? What do I need to do to be safe, to survive?
And I was immediately shoved into a world on my own at the age of 17, a world that I was taught to hate, despise everything about it, not be a part of. And I'm like, well, what do I do now? My parents are gone. I can't even find someone to co-sign for me for an apartment.
We interacted a little bit, us sisters. We helped each other where we could and made it through.
Thank you, Pets, because you got me out of that terrible situation. I could have gone to South Carolina with them to this legit commune, and who knows where my life would be today. I had to go through all the things that I went through to get where I am.
But that's true of all of us, right? So like, I think people get upset that we're out here complaining about whatever, about our life. And yeah, that's true. We're going to call out bullshit when we see it. But the fact remains that all of us, both of us, all the people listening, all the other WCG kids that went through that, we all are who we are because of that.
Right.
And I think we all should appreciate and love who we are now.
Yeah.
Right? Because it is not going to do us any good to be hating on ourselves. That's what the church wanted us to do. Yeah. And so we're going to need to take that and turn it around and just accept that that's what happened, but that we are who we are now. And all we get to do from here is move forward. If we stay stuck in those ways of thinking, if we let it control us still, it continues to win. And I don't want it to win anymore. I want us to be liberated. I want us to be free to see what the world actually needs from us and what we need from it. And to keep talking about it, because that's how we're going to unpack this bullshit.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us for this 5th part of the Herbert W. Armstrong timeline. I thought this was going to be the last one, but it looks like we are going to have another one after this. Lots to unpack. Thank you for joining us, and like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe.
That's why I give no shits now, Pat, because I couldn't give any shits.
We're the Apostate Sisters, and we give no shit.
I don't give a shit and a half.
I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck.